We- Okay, welcome everyone. We are the Environmental Committee from King's Chapel in Boston, and we've been meeting since about 2021. We became engaged in the idea because of climate crisis and the importance of facing it head on in whatever way we could, because we believe it's a critical moral and spiritual issue of our time. We've focused on several areas, starting with our home base, greening of our sanctuary, parish house, and parsonage. That's an ongoing thing. We have old buildings. It's taking time, but we're working on it. The second focus is to facilitate education and conversation, and we've been doing that with many different speakers from different areas of the city who are involved in different organizations of advocacy and all kinds of work being done. And third, we want to connect with advocacy communities and faith groups, which we've been doing. And then finally, we want to highlight the good work that many people are doing. So we have two wonderful speakers today who have been and are doing the good work. I just want to point out that on our webpage, as Kent said earlier, we have recordings from the past 3-4 years, and they are still very relevant to today. They deal with sustainable and organic agriculture practices, greening our lifestyle, how to electrify our homes and our transportation, how to invest our money wisely in ways that will really support the future of our planet. And most recently, we heard from John Walke from Green Roots. It's an organization in Chelsea and East Boston that works with immigrant communities there on environmental justice issues. And last month, we met with David Mishalam from Speak for the Trees. And his organization is providing trees for people in areas in Boston where there's little or no tree canopy, for all the environmental reasons that it's important to have that kind of green environment. So we welcome you today, and I have one word from a very wise woman, and this is one of Sylvia, our committee member Sylvia's favorite quotes. It's from Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And on that note, hand it over to you, Kent.
All right. Well, it's my great honor and pleasure to introduce our speakers tonight. Gregory King, my challenge with this is, as you'll see if you actually read Gregory King's bio, it couldn't be summarized in less than 20 minutes, but here we go. He's an expert in renewable energy, building efficiency, technology innovation, workforce development, and community engagement, all with an environmental justice lens. He owns his own consultancy practice, TSK Engineering. He also founded and is helping to manage Boston Community Solar Cooperative. He is an advisor, board member, director on a number of institutions around Boston, including Roxbury Community College, Northeastern School of Public Policy and Urban Affairs, Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, and Alliance for the Climate Transition. He's currently developing a new framework for environmental justice community development called Green Zone Planning. Very interesting stuff. It's a justice-oriented framework for new investments, prioritizing environmental infrastructure projects for healthier and more resilient communities. So take it away, Greg, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Ken, and it's a pleasure to be here. Let me just share my screen here. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, first of all, just want to again extend my gratefulness for having an opportunity to speak to your group, and couldn't agree more about the opportunity for us to all be engaged in changing the way we consume and produce energy. So, it's widely acknowledged that, we're, at or slightly beyond the tipping point where, due to greenhouse gas emissions from power plants, buildings, and vehicles, and in order to reverse the trend we're on, we really have to figure a way to we have to create new methods and tools for the way we produce energy, the way we consume energy, and of course, a lot of that has to do with as transition of our energy system to more electricity. And regardless of what's being sort of put out there in the public sphere by the current administration, we are truly in the middle of a crisis. I mean, if you look at, if you turn the news on any day, there's some major event going on in our country, which has been detrimental to some community where there's been significant devastation, tornadoes, wildfires, floods, and this only gets worse. So we really have to start thinking about um, the energy transition as a global challenge, one that affects every person on the planet, and is going to require all of us working concertedly to avert the worst realities around climate change. Let's see here, next page. So I'm here to talk a little bit about environmental justice, which is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. As Kit mentioned, I do quite a bit of work around EJ advocacy. It's an important area, and just in terms of the history of environmental justice, it really dates back to the '80s, where a national social and racial protest sparked the environmental justice movement. It was a predominantly Afro-American community that was designated to host a hazardous waste site. This land would accept contaminated soil that resulted from illegal dumping of toxic waste along roadsides. And after removing the contaminated soil, the state of North Carolina considered a number of potential sites to host, but ultimately settled on a small Afro-American community. And so over the time since the mid '80s, environmental justice has become, a major focus of action, because as it turns out, there was a pattern. This community was not alone. There have been many communities, Afro-American communities of color, intentionally located near major transportation corridors, or what we refer to as power plants, where they were whole communities were being exposed to very bad environmental conditions. These have been underserved. Typically, the property values there are lower. The environmental conditions are poor, in the sense that life expectancy is lower. I did a study, Grove Hall area of Boston. The mortality rate between Back Bay and Grove Hall is a 10 years difference, and that's partly attributable to the fact that they have some of the worst air quality. There's 3% of the land mass and 38% of the brown fields. So there's quite a bit of in a substantial amount of property there. And so we've had sort of a history around energy justice, particularly from the environmental justice lens, where there's been a history of exclusion from clean energy initiatives. So marginalized communities haven't been actively engaged in policy planning and policy making. There's been high energy burden. Typical household in Roxbury has a 43% higher energy burden than an equivalent household in the Back Bay. And then, of course, there's a significant underrepresentation in the workforce. So, according to McKinsey, we need $165 trillion of investment to decarbonize the global energy system. So it's a huge, economic development opportunity. It has some very significant workforce needs, and it's an opportunity as we think about the transition to think about including everybody in the work that's necessary for us to decarbonize. So in 2021, Massachusetts passed the first climate bill, and in that climate bill, it institutionalized environmental justice. So it really focused on inclusion of marginalized communities, uh, reduction of disproportionate impacts on communities of color, investments in green jobs and workforce, and strengthening local voices. And so environmental justice community designation has been in place in Massachusetts since the climate bill was passed in 2020, 2021. And it's been essentially defined by the following criteria. So we define environmental justice in Massachusetts using income, and this is all driven, by the way, by census data, minority population, language proficiency, or a combination thereof. Now, the interesting thing about our environmental justice designation in Massachusetts, it has nothing to do with any environmental damage or harm that's been done to any community, and that's among the major fundamental weaknesses. So out of 351 cities and towns that are in Massachusetts, about 200 have environmental justice census blocks and subsequently qualify for any set aside funding that is designated for environmental justice communities. The challenge with that is that a lot of the funds that have been appropriated haven't necessarily gone to the neediest or the dirtiest or the most polluted communities. It's been provided to the communities that are most connected. So places like Wellesley and Lexington, are eligible to receive and have received funds, where communities like Roxbury and Dorchester have suffered. And again, it's a function of them not necessarily being as well connected as other communities, and that is a problem. So because of this, there's a failure to prioritize investments in the most needy communities. And there's a real significant need we have here in Massachusetts to kind of reimagine what environmental justice could be, by recognizing that every community has a unique set of circumstances, its unique set of challenges, and we need a system that really is more focused on schooling or prioritizing the communities that are most damaged. And so, one of the things that was recently done in 2024 is there was in November of this year, there was another climate law passed, this one called an Act Promoting Clean Energy for the Grid, Advancing Equity and Protecting Ratepayers. And cumulative impact analysis was mandated. So this was a really big step in the right direction. This particular requirement means that any project of substantial size needs to look at the stressors. So if a power plant was in a community, if there was a toxic waste site, if there are brownfields, there now is an organized, facilitated methodology for projects to be evaluated so that we're not continuing to dump undesirable projects on specific communities and expecting them to carry the burden. Um, One of the challenges with cumulative impact analysis that exists today is that it's triggered by a developer wanting to develop something. And in many of our more damaged environmental justice communities, we do not have motivated developers looking to invest in those communities for various financial, return reasons. Um, and so I filed some legislation in Massachusetts called an act promoting environmental justice. It's intended to complement or replace the system used to designate environmental justice communities. Because our current designations are based on race, I do think they will be challenged by the current administration that seems to be going after any programming that is using race as a criteria. It's been the basis for their attacks on DEI, and of course some of the attacks on our educational institutions around anti-Semitism. And so this particular proposal is based on development of a scoring system that uses public health, greenhouse gas emissions, energy burden, and demographic data. And when I talk about public health, I'm talking specifically about mortality, asthma, COPD rates, other data or data sources that are in the general public demand, emissions data, emissions from buildings, emissions from cars or vehicles, and what have you. And this particular legislation designates certain communities as green zones based on this scoring algorithm. And it also creates a green zone investment fund. And the fund itself would be supported by leveraging fines paid by polluters. And specifically, there's a regional greenhouse gas initiative where utilities who are operating fossil fuels pay into a fund. There's also in Boston and Cambridge now a building performance or building emissions ordinances, which require building owners of a certain size to lower their building emissions or pay a fine. And then the Attorney General has a new environmental justice fund that was created out of certain lawsuits. Probably the most notable one was the Merrimack Valley Settlement Fund, where there was a gas explosion in the Merrimack Valley that damaged homes and resulted in fatalities. And this particular legislation is supported by a story map that we've developed to essentially highlight the huge disparities that exist between different communities. The higher the score, the more damage the community. And the goal with this is to really try to get our policy and investments to align with the most significantly damaged communities that exist here in our state. And not surprisingly, many of these communities happen to be communities of colors or immigrant communities in places like Boston, Lowell, Lawrence, Springfield, in Worcester. And these communities are in desperate need of significant financial support in order there's going to be a need for an investment. And while there was some optimism based on the Inflation Reduction Act and the EPA grants, with the new administration taking over, many of those grants have been frozen or canceled. And so we're sort of back to square zero. And what I'm personally hoping is the state of Massachusetts will step up its efforts to fill the void created by a federal retreat on environmental justice and begin to support bills of this nature. And on that note, I'm going to stop talking and stop sharing my screen. And I think I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Elena, to explain a little bit about the energy affordability bill. And then we're hoping to have some dialogue with everyone about what's going on in Massachusetts and what we might be able to do together to try to continue to push forward on an energy transition that is equitable and just.
I think maybe we have time for one clarifying question, Greg.
Sure.
Someone asked, would you be able to define energy burden?
Yes. Oh, thank you. And sorry, apologies for that. Those of us that live in this world sort of assume those terms. So, energy burden is the percent of your income, your disposable income, that's used for paying your energy bill. And so in Massachusetts, in some of our lower income communities, we have energy burdens, 17, 19%, where in more affluent communities, it's more like 1 to 2%.
Okay, thanks. All right, I'm going to introduce Elena and then we'll go have more time for questions at the end. So Elena Weissman is Regional Director Northeast for Vote Solar. She's an environmental advocate for inclusive and equitable clean energy policies. And right now she's coordinating at least 2 active legislative campaigns in Massachusetts. One is on distributed energy resources, including solar and battery storage. And one is on equitable clean energy policies, which she's going to talk about tonight. She formerly worked on criminal justice reform in New York and was the director of the Bronx Freedom Fund. So thank you, Elena, and over to you.
Thank you, Kent, and thanks everyone for having me. Greg, it is always an honor to share a Zoom stage with you. Tough act to follow, but I will try. Can I also share my screen?
I think you should be able to. Have you tried?
Oh, yes, I can. Sorry.
Good.
Okay. Can everyone see my slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Let me see if I can also see you all. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to talk about a campaign that Vote Solar has been helping to facilitate, which is called Clean Energy Equity, the topic for today. So a little bit of background about Vote Solar. Kent, thank you for the introduction. We're a national nonprofit organization, and we work at the state level in about 25 different states, working on legislation and on regulation to make clean energy more accessible. And the focus that I have in Massachusetts, and that most of us have kind of all across the country in terms of what accessibility looks like, is making sure that the benefits of our clean energy transition are accessible to people who've been most harmed by the climate crisis and by energy burdens, which is what Greg was speaking about. Let me go to the next slide. So as a sort of summary, this is what Greg just talked about. So everyone in Massachusetts pays to support our clean energy programs, whether through the tax base or through your utility bill. But not everyone can access the benefits of that transition, particularly the economic benefits. But that also is the same for the cleaner air and the climate benefits that come along with the transition. So and what it boils down to is that the same households who stand to gain the most from the clean energy transition, who have high energy burdens and who live in frontline communities, are the least likely to do so. So we have a working group, and you'll see the different members on a future slide. And Greg has also been a big part of this too, and has, as you can tell, really valuable and invaluable perspective and input on this. Where we started off talking about the problems that Greg was presenting on, and then came up with a proposed solution. So last year we introduced an amendment to the climate bill, and this year for the first time we introduced standalone legislation that sets up something similar to the Justice 40 requirement that the federal government used to have, which would say that environmental justice populations in Massachusetts have to receive a proportional percentage of the benefits of our clean energy programs in Massachusetts. And a cornerstone of the campaign is defining what those benefits look like. And I will get into the summary of what the legislation looks like in just a second. I'll just name that it draws from a successful program that Vote Solar also worked on in New York, with the New York climate law, the CLCPA. I'm going to mostly skip over this because this is what Greg covered, but just a good snapshot of what the scope of this problem looks like in terms of why our group convened and why we proposed this legislation. To look at solar just as an example, because that's most of what Vote Solar likes to focus on. Just 0.5% of solar projects that use the state incentive program serve low-income customers. So the state we're not only lacking on having goals for an equitable deployment of clean energy, but also on like meeting some of the sort of paltry goals that we do have. And I can send these slides if people want that info. So our proposal is this, an act advancing clean energy equity. It was filed by Senator Miranda on the Senate side and Representative Owens on the House side. At the bottom of the slide, you can see the list of endorsing organizations, which is not fully representative of our working group. For various reasons, there's more people who are a part of our discussions whose organizations like don't endorse legislation, but we love to have people endorse. And I can talk more about our coalition structure later if people have questions. And this bill is it's a proposal to use clean energy as a form of energy justice for Massachusetts environmental justice communities. And this is what the bill does. Overall, the sort of high level vision that we have with this bill is that we want clean energy to be used as a tool for environmental and energy justice. It does 3 different things in order to, what I shared in the summary, in order to ensure that the benefits of our programs are driven to EJ populations. First, it directs the newly codified Office of Environmental Justice and Equity to consult with different named stakeholders to define what clean energy benefits are. And our coalition is very focused on tangible economic benefits of the clean energy transition. Second, it requires that a proportional percentage of those benefits be directed as EJ populations, as that term is already defined in law. And just to give you an indication of what that would look like, right now, 50% of people in Massachusetts live in an EJ population. So 50% of the benefits should flow to EJ populations. It's really sort of a question of just fairness right now. And third, it directs the office to work with all the different relevant agencies who implement clean energy programs to track where benefits are going and to make recommendations to get us to a place of proportionality. And we really feel like this proposal, as we've put it together, highlights these 4 values. So transparency is really important. We want to make sure that the office is tracking and publishing the level of benefits that go to EJ population. So that would need to start with a baseline. Justice, we want to make sure that the benefits are driven to communities that have been most harmed by climate change and by pollution and by different oppressive state policies like redlining that have gotten us to a place of these overlapping crises. We want to think about accountability. Massachusetts leaders talk a lot about making clean energy accessible for low-income households, and the climate bill said that benefits should flow equitably, and we want that to have teeth, and we want it also to keep pace with future deployment of clean energy programs. And then lastly is leadership. I think right now, obviously, there's a little bit of a void of leadership on certainly at the federal level, and it's up to states right now to be kind of taking up that mantle. So this is a moment for Massachusetts really to set a strong example for other states and for other localities to pursue energy justice in the wake of undoing of federal commitments and climate action. This is also a great moment for us to be focusing on this, and a really important one. So Massachusetts has a skyrocketing and worsening energy burden crisis. Our utility bills are among the highest in the nation. I'm sure everyone knows all about this. This is like the topic that everyone is discussing right now. And as we shift more to electrification without focusing on cost-saving measures for the hardest hit households, that issue is only going to get worse. We also are coming on the heels of a really good climate law that the state passed last session, codifying the Office of Environmental Justice and Equity. And it's important to us that we can sort of use that as a foundation for this policy, and build on their directive, which right now doesn't have a lot of like quantifiable goals built into it. And so we want to focus on giving the commitments that are in the climate law some teeth and some specificity around what equity should look like. A big cornerstone, if any of you were following or if you were not following the climate law last year, is siting reform. I'm sure John from Greenyard spoke to you about this, and he's part of this coalition too. So I like to think about siting reform, which is one of our priorities too, as kind of stopping the bad from going to overburdened communities. And this is about like, how do we bring the good to the communities that we're trying to prevent harm from going to? And then obviously the new administration. So our progress is definitely threatened, both in terms of clean energy deployment and of making sure that the benefits of that deployment are serving all Bay Staters, especially people in environmental justice communities. But we also think that those threats can energize state leaders to act on something like this. And it just, it really feels like this is the moment to act, I think, on something like this. I did want to mention some challenges that like might come along with this campaign, in case there's questions about it. So 2 things. One is our sort of ongoing threats to the environmental justice definition, politically and legally. So the chair of the committee that this bill needs to go through, sometimes we'll talk about the definition being overly broad. And sometimes other legislators are not willing to like engage in that conversation due to his leadership position. And that could create a little bit of a chilling effect in the current sort of legal and judicial landscape that we're in right now. But that's not, unique to this campaign. And then I guess another challenge that we're sort of working on educating lawmakers about is, no, we didn't already do this. Like, yes, we passed a climate law last year and there was an environmental justice component to it. And yes, Justice 40 was a thing for a while. It's not anymore. We want legislators to understand that, but we're doing some sort of like, popular education in the State House around why this is still necessary and how it builds on the great work that they already did last session. And then lastly, just to think about what the impact of this could be and what the strategy is. So if this bill passes and is fully implemented, it would mean that ultimately Massachusetts is using clean energy as a tool for justice instead of replacing one broken system with another, which, of course, is a missed opportunity and also counterproductive. So for us, especially this focus on defining benefits on sort of tangible economic improvements to people's lives would really mean that the policy's impact would be felt the most fully in areas that have the most harm and kind of the greatest need. We see this campaign as really strategic because it has been shaped by environmental justice and equity-focused organizations. You saw the list of different endorsing organizations before. We are, proud to have assembled a really awesome group where everyone kind of came to consensus around what this should look like and what it looks like to benefit EJ communities in Massachusetts. And it also, because of the sort of wide breadth of what the coalition has, who the coalition has as a part of it, there's a lot of overlapping work in other sectors. So for instance, like low income efficiency assistance, electrification, the workforce development, these types of things that are very important to clean energy deployment, but not always represented in sort of like environmental groups. And we also think that this is a winnable campaign. We're getting good indications from legislators and from the administration that this is at least a topic in principle that they want to be advancing this year. And there is a strong anchor organization running this campaign, which is Vote Solar. We have a comms team, and it's going to remain a priority for us no matter what. And yeah, we're really excited to hopefully build on the success of New York and Illinois and lead the nation once again in passing this. So would love for you all to get involved in whatever way makes sense. I will stop sharing my screen. I'm happy to send more materials around later, or answer any questions now, but just really appreciate this opportunity to share with you all about the work we're doing.
Thank you. Well, I had a few questions that I imagine others may want to hear the answers to. I'm not sure everybody knows actually what Justice 40 and Solar for All are. Could you quickly summarize what those are?
Yeah, so the Justice 40 commitment was something that the Biden administration was operating under as a sort of like umbrella value for climate and clean energy monies that were flowing under his tenure, which said that 40% of those funds needed to be invested in disadvantaged communities. And that happened. Like, it's now been dismantled, but it was a thing under the last administration. Massachusetts, to its credit, is saying that they want to continue to uphold it, even though it's no longer a requirement for any money that comes from the federal government, whatever money that may be, probably not a lot. But not every state is doing that. And also there's no requirement for Massachusetts to do it. And then one big difference that I'll note between Justice 40 and our bill is that Justice 40 is about like where the dollars go. In our bill, we've been really careful to not talk about like money just going to a place, but really to think about the benefits of investment, because just because a project goes into a particular community and money is being spent there does not mean that it's improving anyone's lives. So that's a key difference for us. And then Solar for All is a federally funded program that aims to bring solar within reach to low income households, and I think every state. But so far, we think the money is flowing. Massachusetts has a good plan for implementing it. There's still, I think, like some questions around whether we're getting that money or not, but hopefully it will happen in Massachusetts, and this can build off of that.
Great, thank you. Well, the floor is open for questions. Hearing none, I'll ask another one. What is the status of the bill in terms of, are you still looking for co-sponsors of the bill, or where are we right now with respect to the campaign?
Yeah, we're definitely looking for co-sponsors. Vote Solar has an active like action alert that people can send to their members that directs them to, write to their representative telling them about what this is and asking them to sign on as a co-sponsor. And then of course, when we have our sort of individual lobby visits with legislators is a top priority that we're bringing up to them. But absolutely, we are still looking for co-sponsors.
Great, thank you. Let's see, Paul, you had a question, I think.
Yes, I did. I had the pleasure of attending a program with Greg yesterday on Renew Energy. And Greg, have your bills been filed, and are they open for co-sponsorship?
Yeah, so the bill's been filed. However, there's additional work being done at the moment on the scoring algorithm, which is really an important part of the legislation. As Elena's mentioned, there are concerns about the current definition of environmental justice being attacked because there is a racial component as part of the definition. And so my work is focused on developing a very robust algorithm that could be used as a proof of concept, to demonstrate that there is a quantitative way using public data that we can establish the amount of damage and harm that's been done to any individual community. And so until I have that algorithm finalized, my strategy was to not essentially look to promote or seek sponsorship for the bill until it was ready. There's also a reality that as the actions of our new administration begin to become reality, that there's likely to be a more likely favorable environment for this type of legislation to get real attention. I mean, the thing we're trying to solve with the legislation is to create a system for prioritizing investment, because ultimately, when we talk about energy justice and environmental justice and the realities and the history behind it, the solution to it all is investment in clean energy. And we need to have sources of funds that aren't taxpayer or ratepayer based. So part of the reason the legislation is focused on leveraging funds from polluters, it seems like a very, very good approach to taking money from polluters and putting it in towards cleaning up communities that have been damaged by pollution.
So does everybody know that he's talking about make polluters pay, which is another piece of legislation that's currently being proposed. And that would fund some of the stuff that Greg is talking about.
Right. Yeah, it's important that if you say, well, what do we need environmental justice in Massachusetts, particularly in light of the fact that we had billions of dollars of federal commitments frozen and canceled. So a lot of money that we were hoping to get into communities is no longer likely to get there, and we don't really have a public, either. Um, there isn't an appetite, I think, for ratepayer or taxpayer funding to solve this problem. We need to solve it by leveraging the funds that are being generated from bad actors, so it could be used to divert it for good. I mean, Ken, I just want to make another point to everyone in the audience that it may there's been in the news a bit, I think, around utility rates and energy affordability in Massachusetts. I don't know that everyone really recognizes that over time our rates that you pay for your electric or gas bill are not simply about paying for the supply of fuel or the distribution of electricity or investments in power plants. It's being used to subsidize programs like the Mass Save program, like the SMART program. That's the solar incentive program. And what's happening is that these programs are being funded by everybody, but only leveraged by a small percentage or a percentage of the population that has the means. And so, for instance, in the case of Mass Save, many of the incentives are offered as rebates, meaning that the homeowner has to come out of pocket to buy a heat pump or invest in a solar panel. And they don't necessarily have the credit score or the cash to do that. And so we have a scenario where there's a large percentage of our ratepayer base that have been paying into this system and getting nothing out. And that is something we really have to figure a way to stop and to reverse and to make sure that money. So this is why Elena's bill is such an important step in the right direction. It's really about recognizing that we need to designate monies so that it gets in the right places and that it's not continually everyone funding something that they just is beyond their means. It's the essence of inequity is sort of this energy tax that low and moderate income families are paying because they can't access the incentives for solar or for energy efficiency.
Well, we had one question from the chat from Ted Wade, who asked, where are the hurdles or opposition to these bills?
Well, one thing I'll name, in addition to what I had outlined in those slides, is that I think right now there's a sort of like general ethos in the state house of like just like tightening our belt when it comes to spending. And I think a lot of legislators are hesitant to do something without having like a clear price tag on it. So one challenge that we have as a coalition is talking to legislators about how like what we're proposing is not necessarily talking about added spending. We're talking about where spending should be sort of focused and where the benefits should go. But that being said, because we're leaving it up to the administration to define what benefits look like and what implementation should look like, there's definitely a question mark on what the sort of like best way towards implementation will be, and whether and what that will, whether that will cost anything and how much it will cost. And to sort of talk about like how essential it is that if we're going to be transitioning to clean energy, which we are, and which we're also advocating for in other forums, that we do it right, and that this is an essential thing to spend money on.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and I would just build on what Elena just mentioned, that there is increasing pressure at the state level on discretionary spending, as the reality around federal cuts and cuts in budgetary programs that have been around for a long time, including programs like the Low Income Heating Assistance Program, uh, programs that serve food banks and other things. So these programs are very vital, and I think reality is that there's a recognition that we're going to have to divert resources to help stand up some of those programs, so that large portions of our population who happen to be low income or people of color are not left out completely in the cold, as the current administration seems to intend. So I think it's an important thing for all of us to recognize. Part of the reason uh, the structure of my bill doesn't use any ratepayer or taxpayer money is because I can read the tea leaves in terms of what the likely outcomes are when it comes to sources of funds, and there's going to be a tightening of the belt. I think last week the governor initiated a hiring freeze, and she also initiated an energy affordability bill. I think recognizing there's a lot that can be done to make the transition and the cost of transition, that large $165 trillion number, more palatable locally. And I think those are all important things for us to consider as we think about the energy transition, to make sure that we're acknowledging the realities that the investment needs to be made, but doing it in a way that doesn't overburden uh, communities that are already significantly overburdened.
Well, so a lot of us here are connected with faith organizations in Boston. What can we do? What should we do to help drive this stuff forward?
I mean, for us, our focus in the coalition right now is a co-sponsorship push. So if this is something that speaks to you and you think could resonate with your fellow congregants or with anyone in your neighborhood, we would love to have greater amplification of our calls to action. And there's other ways that you could get involved in the coalition. We have like a listserv that you could join if you want to get updated. We meet every other Friday for about 45 minutes to talk through strategy. Our bill's been assigned to a committee, so it'll have a hearing at some point, hopefully in like the summer or fall. There'll be opportunities to testify. We're thinking about opportunities for public messaging, like writing letters to the editor, op-eds. When you see a piece about the clean energy transition, we want to be saying loud and clear, like, who's benefiting from this and how can we make sure that we're driving benefits in a strategic way. So happy to talk offline with anyone about what some of those ideas could look like for you and help you be the best advocate that you can.
And I would echo in the case of the legislation I'm working on, when it's not ready, it's not campaign ready, but when it is, I will certainly be in touch and support it and thankful for any support you could offer. Again, I think we have an opportunity using today's information management world to do a better job at designating EJ communities and to figure creative and innovative ways to finance investments in these communities so it doesn't add to the burdens of ratepayers or taxpayers.
Well, that's great. I mean, I think we have an organization now among the many of the churches that are represented here. So we'll be sure and pass on any alerts or information you've got about things we can do to all the congregations.
And Ken, can I make a little bit of a plug for the Boston Community Solar Cooperative?
Oh, please do. That's my favorite thing.
Yeah. For everyone's benefit, I'm a co-founder of community-based initiative to own the solar generation we need to decarbonize buildings, transportation, and power generation. It's called the Boston Community Solar Cooperative, organized as a cooperative under Massachusetts cooperative law. And we're a worker cooperative where our members are able to receive passive income from the sale of electricity. So we're a startup. We have our first project under development in Dorchester on the rooftop of the Dorchester Food Co-op, who will be buying all the power from us. But our goal as a cooperative solar organization is to develop rooftop systems and ground mounted or canopy systems around the city of Boston. And in doing so, create a movement where communities can own the new solar generation we need to support distributed energy resources, solar, wind, batteries, these technologies. So these are, we think about the grid, historically has been a hub and spoke model. Um, and now we are moving towards more of a node or mesh model where energy generation can be much more local, and it can be on demand when it needs to be, and much more adaptable, flexible, and resilient. And in making that transition, there's no reason why community can't own these assets. Given the ability for us to leverage investment tax credits and other innovative and creative financing solutions like the Solar for All program, there's a real window of opportunity for us to develop more and more community-owned solar that generates passive income for families. That income could be used for paying for their energy, for education and food. And we are looking for rooftops. So if anyone is interested in hosting a site, we will pay you to lease your roof. And we can certainly offer members of your congregation discounts on energy. We've been talking to some health care clinics about a program where we would do a deep discount for their patients. So we're really looking to try to make this a win-win, for all, meaning the communities we serve, the people who live in those communities having more say over their energy future, uh, who gets to work on projects, where projects get cited, and what kind of benefits can be accrued to the community. So if anyone has a rooftop, we have the ability to evaluate, make a proposal using Google Earth technology. So you don't even have to have a visit. We can do it all from our desk.
Yeah, thank you. That is such great work you're doing. So we hope to hear more about that. That's for sure.
Yep.
Let's see, we have two more people that have asked questions before. Does anybody who has not asked a question, would you like to ask one? Okay, we're gonna lose Elena momentarily. She has other duties she has to fulfill. So first, I just want to thank you, Elena, for your great work and your talk tonight and making time for this group. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Happy to be here. I'm good till my husband and toddler walk in the door. They'll just,
Oh,
I
okay.
think they won't be minute.
Okay, good. We won't lose you quite yet.
No.
All right, Paul, you have another question?
Yes, I do. I want to take advantage of this this audience. When my wife and I are, those white privileged people, but we're also environmentalists, and we put a 6 kilowatt system on our home, and we paid approximately $2.10 a watt to put for that system initially. With the investment tax credit, that brought down the price to about $1.40. And right now, we size that system to add an electric car at some time in the future. But at this moment in time, we're making twice as much power as we use, and the rest is going on the grid. There is a Form Z, I'm sorry, Appendix Z, that in the case of National Grid, which serves Worcester, I can file to have that surplus power, that difference between what I use and what I make, be allocated to our church, First Unitarian. And so if any of you find yourself in that situation, or you think you need another nudge to put solar on your home, please consider that as a possibility to support your faith community as well.
Thank you, Paul. That's great. Let's see, Ted Wade, would you like to ask your question? You had one in the chat. Where are you? Well, maybe we lost Ted. I don't see him.
No, I'm here. The question is basically in past legislative sessions, the 2-year session cycle, environmental legislation typically has waited until the end of the 2-year cycle, and then we've gone through the process of lots and lots of different competing bills and interests come together in an omnibus bill, and then you go through the cycle that often extends beyond the end of the formal legislative session, where you've got the Reconciliation Committee that's trying to sort of reconcile Senate and House versions. Is there any reason not to expect this poor pattern to follow in this legislative session?
No, I don't think there's any. I mean, again, it just seems to be the nature of our democracy that when it comes to these types of bills, it always comes to down to the last minute. And there's always compromises, amendments that come into fold. I just think it's the reality. As you know, last year we had a major climate bill not get approved, and it dragged on until November of last year. And I think we're going to see more of that, not less of it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was modestly hopeful that there were small steps toward more transparency, for committee votes and that kind of thing. Any sense of progress in sort of openness in committee procedures so that you can sort of see where people stand and greater opportunities for having conversations. I was going to say bringing pressure, but having conversations with legislators.
I'm going to pass that to Alina. She has a little bit more experience working the State House than I do. Alina, you still there?
Yeah, I think what legislators need to hear is that we don't only care about sort of like short-term relief, which is really important, but that also we need to be sort of investing in long-term solutions to make everything cheaper and more affordable. So like distributed energy resources, for instance, that's the other campaign that Vote Solar is working on that Kent was mentioning. Feels like a really important thing to be pushing for them, like for them to understand. I think when it comes to clean energy equity, they don't always realize that there are environmental justice populations in their district. So like we have a series of maps that constituents can bring to visits with their legislators to show what's what in their district. And like the type of impact that this could have in terms of bringing dollars to their constituents. But yeah, I mean, I think having these one-on-one conversations are still really helpful, and it's easy to come to solution with the political process, especially when they save everything to the end of the session. But we're hoping we have, it's to do our part now also. Am I answering your question?
Yes, thank you.
There's a high degree of optimism needed to get things across the finish line. So we just continue. Thank God we're in Massachusetts, where there's still a strong desire to work on the energy system transition, to do it equitably, and to try to balance the needs of developers versus ratepayers, and affordability. So I think we're blessed, honestly, to have leadership at our state level that understands the complexities and the nuances and is trying to navigate it in a thoughtful way.
That's great. All right, well, I think maybe we should draw things to a close. We're going to, Bill Wilson, who's going to be our next speaker next month, is maybe just going to say a word about what he's going to speak about on June 16th, I believe it is. It's a Monday. And Bill, if you want to ask your other question, feel free.
Okay, thank you, Ken. So I've been working for about 17 years on trying to change the consumption pattern of coffee brewed at home in the United States from to shade-grown coffee. And this is a very easy concept to understand. It's basically raising coffee in a forest compared to raising coffee in cleared land, raising coffee on small farms as opposed to raising coffee on plantations where the labor comes from migrant workers, in country migrant workers. And it's been, modestly successful, but not at all what we thought. So lately I've been really looking at our food system in the United States and its relationship to climate change and its relationship to the health of the earth we all share and biodiversity. And I have concluded, being hardly educated and not a scientist, that if we could change the agricultural and forestry systems in the United States, we could really turn back the ravages of climate change, and we would have a much healthier community. And the resistors to this idea primarily lie in money, because the money rules, and the money in the agrochemicals and food processors and food distributors and the gas and oil people really don't want the big farm, chemical farm, high yield farm, clear cut forestry. They don't want any of that. They just want to be able to take from the land as much as they can, with as big as margin as they can. So my presentation on the 16th is going to be about we can save the world by what we eat. And I'm working on a couple of projects besides my coffee that are in that vein, and it's very quixotic. I'll try to make it kind of funny.
Bill's involved with the Audubon Society in presenting some of this work around New England.
Yeah, also Northeast Organic Farmers Association of Vermont,
Right.
where we actually have some hope to save the world.
All right. Well, thank you again to Greg King and Elena Weissman for their wonderful talks and presence here. And they're doing wonderful things, and I hope we can help them. So thank you all, and I hope we can see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
Apple.
night,
Thank you very much.
everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank
Night.
you. Good night.
Night.
Thank you.